You know security is hard, so let's assume we're probably gonna get pwned by noon. But if we all start to get the basics right, we might not fully get pwned until tonight. Well, welcome to the 7-Minute Security Podcast. I'm Brian Johnson. I'm your friend and I'm your host, and I'm joined today for the fourth time. He's back for a four-peat, if that is a word. Christopher Fielder of Arctic Wolf. If you're keeping track, if you're keeping score at home, Christopher joined us for the first time on episode 444 to talk about threat hunting and threat intel and how to do some pen testing of your MDR and SIM. Came back at episode 464. We talked about some news and also the information security journey, or basically how to start out in your security diapers and then move forward to mature towards a stronger InfoSec program. Back once again, episode 472 to talk about all things ransomware. And I really liked that episode. We got some good feedback about that because we went into kind of a deep dive bulleted list of how do you not get ransomware? And I think those things continue. Unfortunately, we keep seeing companies get bit by those, but there are just a lot of things you can do. Check out that episode because there's a lot of things we as companies can do to make our networks much more resilient. And so now we're back again today, the fourth time, to kind of take some of the past episodes and put them in a blender and talk about them. So specifically, we're going to be playing off of a series that we started not too long ago, just back in episode 480, called Desperately Seeking a Super SIM for SMBs. And that's way too long, but I liked to do the, too many S's thing, I guess. And also, if we have time, revisit the always relevant topic of ransomware and the ways that it oozes into our environments and makes our weekends suck and make our IT and security teams unhappy. But first of all, Christopher, welcome back. Would you mind reintroducing yourselves for those who are not familiar? Tell us a bit about yourself and your role at Arctic Wolf.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Fourth time is the charm, right? Maybe I'll get it right this time.
Me too.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, my name is Christopher Fielder. Quick rundown. So I've been in cybersecurity for over 20 years now. I got so used to saying 20 years that I'm having to get out of that routine saying more than 20 years. Right now, I'm Director of Product Marketing with Arctic Wolf. Again, I always say, don't let that fool you. I'm terrible at marketing, but I am good at talking about this stuff. So hopefully there's some connection there. And yeah, I really enjoy, speaking with you, speaking with everyone out there, doing research and going into these topics.
Awesome. Super good to have you for the fourth time. And I thought we'd kind of kick things off today, since you do work in this SOC and SIM space, to get your opinion and frankly, your help in breaking down some of the challenges in finding and selecting the right SOC provider. Because as that episode 480 kind of kicked off, I started evaluating several vendors. And yes, Arctic Wolf is in there. And yes, you and I might have slightly slanted opinions, right? You work for Arctic Wolf. This is a sponsored Arctic Wolf episode. But I imagine these kinds of challenges I'm having and the questions that I get bombarded with by customers are similar to that, that you've had a million times with prospective customers. So if it's all right, we're just going to jump in and tackle some of these problems together. And I think it's a great first topic to chat about what we call vendor alphabet soup. And, you mentioned before we hit record that you had spent some time in airports. I love going through MSP here back when I used to do more traveling, and often some big information security vendor took up like a whole wall ad. I think it was Cylance or one of those big ones, and it was so full of buzzwords and cool looking, matrix fonts and all this stuff that I was like, well, I know what some of this stuff is, but you're after business, right? So you want to be talking plain English, attract the CEO who's walking by, right? And get his attention to whatever problem your product solves. But no, it's full of some of this acronym soup. So I thought we'd go through a couple of these terms and just see if we can untangle them and level set on them a bit. So the first one is SIM, and I got to get your opinion, Christopher. Is it SIM or SIM? SIM like Jim or SIM like Beam?
I have always said SIM, but
Okay.
I also do not claim to be an expert in this. So I still, I will say things for 20 years and then get corrected on and be like, well, I knew that. So I'm just going to say that it's a SIM.
Okay, I feel like that is one that the majority of the people don't agree on. Therefore, it's okay to pronounce it both ways. But, in the silly intro we have to this podcast, the jingle says, if we all start to get the basics right, we might not fully get pwned until tonight. And I'll have people write in and say, it's not that, it's pond. And I'll say, you know what? Potato, potato. We're just going to have to agree to disagree on this one.
Have you almost gotten into a fist fight yet over GIF and GIF?
No, but I've seen some hot Twitter threads on that. Yeah, how about you?
Yeah, same exact thing. And I will go to my grave saying, you know what? It's graphical image file, right? So it's GIF.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, born and raised for sure. From first computer in high school, it was GIF to me. So if I had to, if there's a civil war at some point and they draw a line in the sand, I will be on the GIF team. Yeah, good call. So okay, so SIM, we're agreeing that there's a couple different pronunciations. I'm going to take the Gardner definition here, that stands for Security Information and Event Management. Technology that supports threat detection, compliance, and security incident management through a collection and analysis of security events, as well as a wide variety of other event and contextual data resources. Okay, and it goes on and on and on. Mm-hmm. If you had a customer on the line that was like, hey, Christopher, just give me the plain English, non-technical definition. Do you think that captures it pretty well? I think of the SIM as pulling in a bunch of data and looking at it to decide if some of it is actionable. Is that like an okay?
It is. But I would say I would level that up one by setting the standard here of saying we're talking about technology and we need to understand that we need to speak in generalizations because vendors just vary greatly. Like if we say, listen, I need a car. Well, there's a very big difference between a Pinto and a Porsche and what they're capable of. In the same way, if we say a SIM, there are vendors that may kind of fall under the mark of what your expectations are, what they're able to do. And there's some that go far above and beyond what a standard SIM may be able to do. But I would say if we're talking in, very general terms, yeah, that's absolutely the case. And the key that you need to really hone in on there is logging, right? So all these devices out there are able to generate those logs and there's just a wealth of information, but it's just such a task to go, well, I'm going to go retrieve every one of those logs and look at every log and compare each log and draw lines between what happened in, A, B, and C devices. So the SIM allows you to really do that in one quick, centralized, unified fashion.
That's good. And I think you make a great point that all SIMs are not created equal, right? Like just because something has got that stamp on it doesn't mean it's doing the things you and I think a SIM should do. Because I've seen plenty of small MSPs and MSSPs sell to their customers what they're calling a SIM, but it is what I would just call a syslog server. It is gathering all the logs in this proverbial virtual big pile, but that's all it is. It's just a POL. Yeah. It's a pile of logs. They're there if you need them. And in my mind, that's still better than nothing. This is kind of a tangent, but in my mind, that's still better than nothing because if in a forensic situation, right, when you get popped and you did, you can at least, to the people that are going to come in and charge $400 an hour, you can at least hand them this huge pile of logs that they can maybe make some sense of. But in the meantime, kind of on the day-to-day, just a pile of logs isn't doing a whole lot to stop active threats, whereas we would expect the SIM to be doing some level of the smart stuff, right? To bring the scary stuff and the things going bump in the night to our attention.
Yeah, absolutely. The $300 car is still going to get you where you need to go. Hopefully, you might have to Fred Flintstone it a little bit, but you'll finally get there. But you're not going to impress anyone. Same thing with, some of those very low end SIMs. They'll tick the box when it comes to, we'll say log aggregation or just log collection, but that's about the extent of what they're going to do. So if you are an actual SIM analyst or somebody that lives and breathes SIM, then you're going to be really disappointed with some of those. And that's kind of the other big thing to point out with SIM in my experience as well, is that it is, or it can be, a very specialized tool, and it can require one or even a series of analysts that are devoted strictly to that SIM. And so you have to ask yourself in a lot of these environments, do I have the ability to dedicate people full-time to it that can actually manage the SIM? Or is this going to be a task where I try to spread it around and it's going to be quite an issue?
Oh, good call. Yeah, and I think that plays pretty nicely into our next definition to talk about, which is SOC, or Security Operations Center. And I'm going to pull a definition from McAfee's website that says a security operations center is a centralized function within an organization employing people, processes, and technology to continuously monitor and improve the organization's security posture while preventing, detecting, analyzing, and responding to cybersecurity incidents. So would you say, in a way, the SOC is the horsepower or the people horsepower that help support the SIM and tune the SIM and update the SIM? And kind of, to use your car analogy, are they a bit of the mechanics on the car to keep things running and keep track of what's happening?
Absolutely. They are the arm swinging the hammer, right? You still have to have the hammer. So yeah, I am, biased here. I think a SOC is super important, and I always have, but they can't work alone. They have to have the tools there as well to be able to do their job. So it's not a matter of SOC versus whatever technology or series of technology. It's SOC and that technology. And then I don't want to sidetrack here, but that brings up another point. Is it McAfee or McAfee?
Oh, shoot.
I always say McAfee.
Yeah, and I don't even remember what I said. I think I'm a flip-flopper.
Yeah.
You hit the McAfee?
I always say McAfee.
McAfee. Okay, yeah.
But maybe that's just me.
Yeah, okay. It'd be funny if just somewhere there's one person who that's all they take away from this is that they disagree with our GIF or our McAfee. But I've heard plenty of both. So just, you be you, I'll be me. We'll go for it.
Perfect. But yeah, the SOC is absolutely important because you can't invest just ridiculous amounts of money into just the most advanced technology stack and not have a well-balanced, well-versed, highly skilled and staffed SOC to run it, because you're just going to have tools sitting there. You're not going to be able to respond to the alerts or know how to tune them correctly or really get much out of it. So you have to have both. It's super important.
And I think that is, sadly, for my customers who have a hard time, very limited budget, they get pitches from all these different vendors and they find, they can barely afford even just a run in-house tool or syslog tool, right? And then you tell them on top of that, you really need somebody to run it. And they'll say, of course, well, can't I that's what I'm buying the software for, right? And it's hard sometimes to, just like the plain English level, help them understand that it's just a piece of the puzzle. Again, using the car analogy, it's like getting the car and then being mad that you're going to need to do maintenance on it. You're going to need the oil changes and keep refilling it with fuel, right? And change out the tires once in a while. But yet it's kind of a hard sell because the customer thinks, I bought the thing to make us more secure. Now you're telling me the thing comes with a dependency thing, but that is just it, right? Until somebody can solve the problem of a SIM, a software that you install in-house, and then with all the AI and ML, and we're going to get to those acronyms, when they have all that in the world and the robots from Terminator are taking over, only then I think will we have the level of SIM that is just self-sustaining. But in the meantime, you just it's peanut butter jelly. You got to have those together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had this discussion with a few people recently that are considering, well, do I go the people route, or this one vendor or series of vendors is telling me that they've got this tool that can solve everything and can replace people. And my answer to that is, look at some of the largest attacks that have happened recently, the really widespread, ransomware attacks to these large advanced companies. Do you honestly think that they didn't have just a really advanced security stack in place and it still happened? So the tools are great, but the tools can't exist alone. They have to have the people backing them up.
Yeah. And I know we want to be nice and accepting of all vendors, but do you think if a customer is hearing from a vendor that, hey, with this, you don't need any people, you don't need any tuning, you're good to go, they should probably run as fast as they can away from that engagement?
I think they need to talk to a different rep, because it's not the tool, because the tools are great, right? I've rarely ran into a tool that wasn't useful in some way. It's just sometimes people can misrepresent what the tool's capable of.
Good call. Yep, that's fair. All right. So we've got SIM, we've got SOC. Now we get into the blank DR section. So we've got EDR, MDR, XDR. Maybe there's another something DR that's not on my radar yet, but I had to go looking for these because I'll be honest, Christopher, if you would have just said yesterday morning, hey, Give me a quick definition of all three and the differences. I wouldn't know. And even after doing some research, I still feel like it's GIF that we don't all agree what they all do, but I'm just going to skim a couple definitions from a few different sites. I was looking at MSP Alert and a site called Infused Innovations for these three definitions. So EDR, one definition is EDR is focused on threat detection and response on the endpoint environment specifically. So they said, think of EDR as being focused on activity on the device as opposed to what's on the network. So think laptops, servers, critical business devices. All right. MDR, we move up a level to detect and respond threats by pulling in data from other sources like our SIM, our network traffic analysis, intrusion detection system. Okay, I think I can wrap my head around that. And then XDR, this Infused Innovation site says, XDR is the ultimate security coverage going beyond endpoint protection to comprehensive monitoring of a broad range of areas. And right here, they say, it's not completely agreed what the acronym stands for. A common understanding is that the X is for extended, especially since another EDR would be too confusing. Others argue that X stands for cross-layered or for quote unquote anywhere. You name it, XDR has it covered. So whether a threat or attack may arise, XDR is there across networks, cloud workloads, and more. It combines the multiple tools of EDR and MDR into a central integrated view. It often uses machine learning and artificial intelligence to do this effectively. And we'll talk about those in a minute. Christopher, what do you think? EDR, MDR, XDR, how many of them do you use on a daily basis? Does the average bear, does the average customer know/care the differences? And you have to kind of argue what does what, or, what do you run across in your days at Arctic Wolf?
Yeah, so I think EDR or some sort of endpoint tool is considered table stakes now. It's a must. It has to be out there because you have to have the visibility on the endpoint. And the definition is great, but I always shy away from formal definitions because they're just harder for me to grasp. I always give kind of an example here or a metaphor when I'm explaining EDR. And I'm like, okay, well, EDR is, imagine that we go to a mall, right? And in that mall, you have all these different stores. And each one of those stores has a security camera in it. And as you go from store to store to store, each one of those security cameras is going to record what you did in that store. Did you steal anything? Did you walk to the back of the store? What did you really do? And all those different feeds are going to feed down to a centralized security office where somebody's just watching a big wall of monitors and seeing what's happening.
I like this. I like this.
And so that's EDR. It's recording, or imagine you have a security camera on each one of your endpoints, as you said, right? Desktop, laptop, cloud, servers, whatever it may be. It's recording what's taking place. And then your analyst can sit back and look at the data that's being collected and what's happening on all those different systems. Makes it way easier than it ever was in like the earlier days of doing this cybersecurity stuff. So that's EDR. And it is essentially table stakes now. As I said before, you have to know what's going on in those endpoints because we see that, that's really where attackers going to land, right? And it's where they're going to be doing most of their work. But it's not the only thing that's out there. So one that I think that we actually kind of skipped over here is one called NDR, and that's network detection response.
Oh, there is another one. Good. Yeah. Okay. All right.
NDR. And so going back to that analogy, if we think of EDR as the camera in each store in the mall or a camera on each device, then let's think of NDR as you go, what's happening actually in the mall, right? In that centralized hallway that, people are walking between stores. We need to know what's happening on there too, because people could be running or there are kiosks that are out there people could be stealing from, whatever it may be. We have to think about that. In the same way, NDR is recording what's happening on the network or the network as it transfers data from one location to another, really monitoring that hallway and also monitoring, what's coming in and out of the mall or what's coming in and out of the network, because you never know what's going to happen on the network itself. The problem with EDR is that you have to have the agent on every single one of your endpoints for it to be truly effective, right? I mean, it's going to be really effective if you're highly deployed, but if you're not 100% deployed, it can't exist by itself. Does that make sense?
That does. Yeah. I like this analogy quite a bit.
Yeah. So with NDR, you're recording what's taking place, as it's traversing the environment. And that way you're able to see, well, did somebody come in and just plug a laptop into my environment? Is there a rogue device on my network? Is somebody, using a port they shouldn't be using, or transferring data, or using a protocol they shouldn't, whatever it may be? That's NDR. Going down the list there, I'm going to throw MDR out for a second, because that's kind of the one that doesn't match with this, because it's a little bit different. It's not technology. But with XDR, and I've heard the same thing, right? Cross detection response, extended detection response. X is a variable for anything. Who knows? It's whatever the vendor wants to call it. But it is the new kid on the block. It's the new technology. And it's taking that idea of saying, EDR, NDR, I've heard CDR for cloud detection response. I've heard TDR for threat detection response. And then, SIM capabilities. It's going, yeah, all those are great. But it's the same problem we've always had, which is an analyst jumping between 5 different consoles to do one job. And it's counterintuitive. It doesn't make sense. Let's put everything into one console where the analyst can see the data that's fed in from endpoint, from network, from cloud, from log ingestion, and then allow them to take action, do detections there and take action from that single console, and start to stitch together on the back end the analytics to say, hey, if we put this endpoint data together with this network data, we can actually see a fully formed attack, possibly, right? So that's definitely where the future is going, is that XDR concept. And we're seeing most vendors kind of pivot over there as well, which makes sense. So that's a really exciting one. And then, as I said, the one that really doesn't match there is that MDR, because that's a service where it's saying, you know what? Okay, these are great tools, XDR or the, EDR, NDR, plus, as you put, in your definition, the NTA or network traffic analysis, or again, network detection response, the SIM utilization. You have all these different tools. Do you have people that can run them? Do you have people that can make use of them? If not, then MDR will come in and do that for you.
Gotcha. I like that. So MDR, would you say that kind of sits at the top and can manage all the other blank DRs under it, like kind of rolling up into one silo?
In an ideal world, but it goes back to, you have a varying range of vendors. You have some endpoint vendors that say, hey, we do MDR. And what they do is management and utilization of their tool alone. And they're calling that MDR. And then you have other vendors that are more broad, like, Arctic Wolf provides managed detection response. And we say that we are truly vendor neutral, and we look at the full spectrum of endpoint, network, cloud, log ingestion. We want to see everything so we can detect at all those locations.
Gotcha. Okay. So if you've got a parser or a translator for, product X, it can be pointed at you as an MDR to roll up and suck in those logs and get that bigger picture of what's happening in the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. By being very open like that, we can also say, you know what, even if we don't have a parser right now, start shooting us that data and we'll get a parser put together so we can utilize it. That way we're not missing out on that important data.
And this is a bit of a tangent and you don't have to name names, but are there any vendors who want to try to keep people under their pane of glass and then therefore try to write their, logs and rules and such in kind of their own language so that it can't easily be passed off to an MDR provider for analysis? Or is it being a more open world these days? I'm just curious.
I think we're seeing more of an open world, but there are certainly vendors that want to still force that vendor lock-in, right? Where they want to say, hey, the only way you're going to get value out of our technology and our service is if you use strictly our service. And yeah, like, hey, consolidate to our stack, use our service, and you'll get the best of everything you possibly need. And that's one approach. And, maybe if that's the approach that you like and it works for your environment, I don't want to say that's the bad approach, but it concerns me anytime you say, I have one vendor for everything from the top down. Because first, what if that vendor is compromised in any way? Then you're entirely dependent upon their stack, and that makes you somewhat vulnerable. And then second, diversity is super important in all aspects of life, and being diverse in your technology stack, I think, is super important because it allows you to get the best of everything, right? And that's something you should really shoot for.
Yeah, good call. I didn't think about that, about on one hand, it sounds good probably on paper to put all your eggs in one vendor's basket, and, you do your email and your online documents and your messaging and video calling and all that with one. But yes, if they get popped, then the exposure is huge, and that's certainly something that customers have come to us and said sometimes, when we come out of a pen test, for example, and it's like, well, you need all these different solutions, and, here's vendor X and Y and this and that. And often they'll say, gosh, it would be so much easier if just, there would be kind of one vendor that we could just push it to fix all these things. And I'm like, I agree from just logistics of writing contracts and one throat to choke and all that. But as you said, there's security concerns. And also, I just don't think, I don't know anybody who doesn't mix a bunch of breeds with, Slack for messaging, but Zoom for video calls, right? A OneDrive for your documents. And
exactly.
Companies have to figure out the best of breed that makes sense for their business. There's just no way one vendor is going to do it all, even though that would be nice.
Yeah, exactly. And if you decide later on that maybe this isn't working out, it's not right for me, then you're going to lose your entire stack. And that's not a fun situation to be in, to be like, well, looks like I have to start over from zero.
Yeah, exactly. And, we had one situation. It wasn't so much a vendor locked-in situation, but it was hey, we're going to change providers. It was a customer that was changing MSPs, and they kind of had everything with them, the break fix stuff, the patching, the antivirus, all of that with them. And upon basically firing this MSP, the MSP just ghosted them. And the MSP hosted all the administrative, the domain admin accounts to everything, the pane of glass for the antivirus console, everything. And so they worked with a few different firms to get those passwords and those apps basically hacked to regain control of their environment. But we went in on a rescue and recovery mission to pen test the network and try to recover domain admin creds. And it was, in a way, the most fun and scary one we've done, because it's not, we had never done that before. I mean, the customer always presumably has control of their own environment. We're just acting like a bad guy. But in this case, it was the on-site contact really didn't know much about the network, just said, here's a subnet, drop your box on here, and good luck to you, I guess, and fortunately we found some unpatched systems with Eternal Blue, and we were able to dump some hashes and clear text creds. But yeah, kind of the same thing there. You get too locked in with a vendor. Yeah, you're right. If you ever have to move or have a bad experience or need to fire them, well then, oh boy, are you in for a big project to scope out entirely new solutions for your whole stack before you can cut over? Oh, yikes.
That is a nightmare situation, and I do not envy that team. So
no,
it's unfortunate.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So I think, have we covered the blank DRs pretty well? Are we ready to move into a couple more hot ones?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. So I think the last couple for this section are ML and AI, machine learning and artificial intelligence. This was another one that I think, you put a dart gun to my head yesterday and say, hey, give me a good definition of both. I wouldn't be able to just rattle it off for you. I would just have my interpretation of those buzzwords. But this article from Forbes, I think, gives a nice answer, and I'm curious for your opinion. But they said, in short, the best answer is that AI, artificial intelligence, is the broader concept of machines being able to carry out tasks in a way that we would consider smart. And machine learning is a current application of AI based around the idea that we should really just be able to give machines access to data and let them learn for themselves. How does that strike you? Does that seem pretty good? Or do you have another nice mall analogy that you have for customers that break this down better? Because I'm going to steal the mall thing if you don't.
Yeah, I wish I had a good analogy for this one. This is one where I'll start by saying I am by no means a data scientist. I wish I was. I highly admire data scientists. I look at data scientists the way that, my parents look at me when I start talking about computer stuff. Like, wow, you're really smart. Like,
yeah.
Like you are able to do stuff that I just cannot understand. But my understanding is that AI is the broader concept here. It's the broader technology and bubble. And then machine learning is a subset of that. So AI is being able to make a device or a system think or act in a way that is, I guess what we could say is human. And then machine learning is how it's going to be able to make those decisions, how it's going to learn. And there's even a subset of that. So when we talk about machine learning or ML, we have to break it down further into the styles of models. And the two most common ones that we really talk about is a supervised or an unsupervised model of machine learning. Is it cool if we go into those a little bit?
Please do. Yeah.
Cool. So when we think about supervised versus unsupervised, we can start with, well, what is a supervised machine learning model? And that's where we are teaching the machine learning model something and then correcting it to kind of put it on the right path. So think of, it does something good and we pat it on the head. It does something wrong and we smack its hand and say, please don't do that again. It's kind of the concept there. But with that, we can get more accurate outputs from it in certain situations. But the difficulty is that it does take somebody to essentially babysit or to educate that machine learning model when it is a supervised machine learning model. It's great for certain applications, right? So when I think about machine learning models that are supervised, I think of things like, music recommendations, some of those apps that are out there, because they allow you to give a thumbs up or thumbs down based on what they generate. So you're like, hey, I really like, I don't know, I'm just going to throw in it, Motley Crue, right? And then you're listening to one or two Motley Crue songs, and then suddenly Miley Cyrus comes on. You have to give a thumbs down or smack that machine learning model's hand and go, no, please don't ever play that again. Right. Because it's learning like, this person doesn't like that song. I won't play that one again. So that's, when I think about a supervised machine learning model. The unsupervised machine learning model is kind of the flip side of that, where you just feed it very large amounts of data and that it says, well, let me look for connections here. Let me look for anomalies. Let me look for patterns or things that make sense to me. And it may find things that absolutely make sense and start pulling out these, interesting patterns or anomalies. It groups things together and says, what is an outlier here? And let me alert on that outlier. And then it's up to the analyst to say, well, is that an issue? Is that truly an anomaly I need to look into? Or is it just something slightly odd? When I'm thinking about an unsupervised model, I go back to an old joke. There was a comedian named Patton Oswalt. He did the voice of Remy the Rat on Reddit.
Yeah. I think I've heard all his stand-up on Spotify. It's hilarious.
Yeah, and he did an old joke years ago, right? I'm going to date myself. Some of you probably remember TiVo. And he said that he recorded one night a Western. And he was like, great, I love this Western. I'll watch it in the morning. And then TiVo had machine learning in it. So it went through and identified and just filled the TiVo up with all these different disparaging shows. He's like, well, how did it do this? And when he actually looked through the full list, he realized that TiVo picked out every show or movie that had a horse in it. Like that's the connection it made. So that is kind of an unsupervised model. Just let me look at everything and find some connection here because it's so eager to just deliver. So again, the problem there is that it can be noisy as it starts to identify those anomalies or draw those conclusions from patterns that it finds. Yeah, both those kind of make sense.
They do. Yeah, I like that. And is it maybe unsupervised machine learning that eventually creates the robots from Terminator 2 and creates Skynet? Because I think they go on their own, or maybe they're tired of having their robotic hands slapped and then they just decide they're going to slap back. I think that was the whole premise of the movie.
That's it. Or it goes, I don't know if you ever read iRobot, goes down the Asimov path and goes, the only way to protect humans is to put them all in a big bubble and not let them go anywhere. Like,
yes.
Yeah, well, that's the future. But no, they're great, but we don't need to get scared yet because machine learning, as useful as it is, it can't yet, at least I haven't seen the ability to really survive on its own in any successful way, at least not from a security context, because both of them require human in the loop. Because otherwise you're just going to be, sending massive amount of alerts off of anomalies or patterns, or you have to train the model, or you're going to get a lot of false negatives or false positives. So you still have to have people in there. So we haven't reached that point yet to where I'm going to be concerned about it being self-aware, but it's maybe one day coming.
Yeah. And I think I'm near 10 years of being involved in some level of penetration testing. And I've been told since day one of that AI and ML, right around the corner, it's going to completely replace us as pen testers. And I think John Strand from Black Hills Information Security has some quotes on that too, where he's like, well, we're still not worried yet. Keep going and your skills will continue to evolve. And, the surface, security will in some areas continue to get better, but there's always, as there's an up and coming cool surface, whether that be cloud or whatever, cloud 2.0, whatever else is next, you're going to need people to manually test that, right, and really figure that out for years before the machines can just jump in and, shove us out of the way and do our jobs for us.
Maybe one day in my lifetime, I'll see a John Henry challenge where who can pwn the environment faster, an actual analyst or a machine.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see. But no, I think it's going to augment an analyst. But why do we truly want to replace analysts? I mean, that just doesn't seem like it makes sense. We can do things. We can approach pen testing or securing or threat hunting in an almost art-like fashion, right? Where we can make these connections that a machine or machine learning can't, or we can be intuitive. We can understand human behavior in a very unique way. So let's use those to, machine learning to identify weaknesses or vulnerabilities, or like Bloodhound, right? The best path to a location or whatever. But then let's actually put the emphasis on the analyst to use that in the correct way.
Yeah, I dig it. Oh, and just one other thing related to the TiVo Patton Oswalt thing. I remember as well from a couple of years, actually probably many years back now. I'm dating myself too, but there was in one of the early Dane Cook, one of his specials, he had a bit on that as well, where he said like, I was trying to watch some of my favorite shows, and TiVo just went rogue and recorded a bunch of stuff for me. And TiVo decided that I like antiques. And he said, so I had to get physical with my TiVo and say something like, just, do your job. I will dip you in candle wax, and I slaughtered it, but it was true, because I did have a TiVo at the time, and same, not quite as bad as Patton had, but I would feel like I turned off all the options for auto record and then wake up to a menu full of things that I am not interested in. So,
oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sure if TiVo was rebooted today, it would be a lot better, but it was kind of humorous back then.
Oh, that was a technology blip in time that I just think we've already grown past.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we covered off okay on AI ML. We're good. Yeah. We're good there for now.
I think based on my understanding, we covered quite a bit.
Yeah, and I take your disclaimer too. Not a data scientist at all, but I think it's good for us to have covered off at these, even at a high level, because they're buzzwords that we're hearing, and then even are not as technical, whatever, customers, friends, they're hearing them as well. So when we're asked about them, right, or if our products use AI and ML, it's good to have a high level understanding.
Yeah, though I will just leave it with saying, if somebody is pitching machine learning at you, it's an excellent tool. It's an excellent way to generate alerts. If they say that you don't have to have people involved, run as fast as you can.
Yes. Yeah, good call. This next question may be more of a binary one, but I see when customers are evaluating SOC solutions and I get on the sales call and the technical calls with these solutions, it's interesting. I'm finding many of them, as far as what they are seeing, what they are ingesting, is either one of two things. It's purely endpoint logs, sys logs, right? Things right off the endpoint that feed into some sort of sensor or SIM. Or they are looking at copies of all of the network traffic and trying to decide, do we have password spraying and scanning for eternal blue and signs of malicious ransomware and those sorts of things. I think this is a loaded question, but can you / should you have one without the other? Or do you really need to get both of those barrels of data in order to get a clear picture of what's happening in your environment?
I say see it all. You have to see it all, right? Let's go back to our mall analogy. When you're trying to safeguard the mall from notorious shoplifter that steals from every store. Well, if you're only recording endpoint, all you're going to see is what they're doing in that store. You're not going to know how they got there, which is super important. So, and you have to put all that together. Well, what did they do in this store? And what did they do in this store? So it's important to see, as soon as they come through the door of the mall, when they're going between stores. And then at the same time, if you only look at the network, you don't have that really micro view of what is taking place on the endpoint. What is their ultimate goal? What are they trying to do? What are they manipulating? Because that's where they're actually doing their work, right? They're traversing the network and then getting on the endpoint. And that's when they're really putting the work in. So you have to have both to see the full picture. And then again, cloud as well, because that's just an extension of your environment, except that's an extension of your environment that's out there for anyone to touch in certain circumstances. So you have to see everything. So no, you can't just look at one data point or one source of telemetry and say, I'm covered, because you're not. You're covered right there, but not from the full attack.
Exactly. And the example I like to give after a penetration test, for example, a customer may be upset that, hey, my endpoint solution didn't trigger at all with the things you were doing. What's up with that? And I can just show them, well, here I was on the network running Responder, a network protocol poisoning tool, right? I captured the hash of your domain administrator. I brought that offline to my basement here to crack that password. And then I used that password to impersonate administrator all over the place. And therefore, I did nothing really that your endpoint should have been too concerned about because it all looked legit. And that, I think, has helped them go, oh, okay, so we need visibility at the network level. And then they, look for a solution. So
yeah. And that's why it's important to have detections at every one of these locations. Because remember, like with endpoint, you're only going to alert on things that you have detections for. So if there's not, if there's a new tactic or new technique or something that's, they're unaware of or they haven't written a detection for, it's not going to alert on it. Yeah, a good EDR will still record the processes and the actions, and you can go back and look through it, but you can't depend entirely on the detection, especially from that one location where maybe the attacker, is going to use that new tactic or technique on the endpoint, but they used a pre-existing one on the network, something that's already known, something that would trigger an alert. And so then you're going to identify them.
Right on. Well, I just have a couple more here to run by you. I want to talk a little bit about communication, a little bit about pricing. So communication, I have found, has been challenging at many levels when looking for a SOC partner. And so by the time this interview comes out, I will have part 2 of my Desperately Seeking SIMs, whatever I called that series, that will be out. And I will have shared that. It's so interesting. And I think there's an industry joke out there somewhere about how you sit there and during the day, your inbox fills up with unsolicited security product marketing, right? Boom, 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 boom. All day, every day, you're putting it to junk, you're deleting it, whatever. And then when you actually go to one of these vendors and you want to see one of their products, you couldn't get somebody to call you back to save your life. And that is the experience I had with one vendor that several folks told me, they're great, best people in the world, solid product, go talk to them. And I could not get, it finally took 2 weeks for me to get a call set up with myself and my prospective customer. And, I know it depends on the rep, right? It's not the company. I'm not giving them a bad name. I'm just saying it's not a good look when you can't even get somebody on the phone. And I have to tell my customer like, oh, don't worry, I've heard great things about him. I just can't get him to return an email. That's one piece of it. And then also when you've actually partnered with the SOC, I've heard complaints from customers about how, they'll get a call and say, oh yeah, about 16 hours ago, we saw signs of, ransomware in your environment and how are things going? And then the customer checks on it and, one warehouse is completely locked up, right? Like the response time wasn't what it should be. And then the customer is saying, oh my gosh, everybody's been pleading with me to get a SOC. Now I have one. I'm getting calls too late in the game for an incident. And then also when I call in to get some help or some guidance, I got to go through a 1-800 phone tree. I got to give them my site ID, which I don't remember. And then it takes me a long time to escalate to somebody that actually knows, oh yeah, you're customer X in Minneapolis. Yeah, we know what your network looks like and how to help you. I just am hearing this constant stream of communication related challenges. And I'm curious from your point of view, from the Arctic Wolf point of view, it certainly seems from my experience that you've seen those and found better ways to deal with them. But what's it like and how do you communicate well and quickly with your customers?
Yeah, so that's the whole basis of our model. That's the reason we were really developed here. Well, you may have heard that term. We say the concierge approach, which I understand we say that a lot, but we also deliver on it, right? So that is really our business model of when you need to get in touch with us, you're going to get in touch with us if we haven't gotten in touch with you first, which is most of the time the case. And we will communicate with you literally any way you need to. If you wanted, phone, Zoom call, email, text message, carrier pigeon, whatever you need. Like if we got to get the information to you, we absolutely will, because this is critical. Like time is money and your business is dependent upon each minute that goes by. You can't be down. So yes, we are going to get in touch with you any and every time we need to, 24/7, 365. That's the most important approach here. If you're paying for a service, you need to have the confidence that who you're paying is going to be available there anytime you need them. So I think that's certainly, one of our key missions, if not our most key mission.
Yeah. And, again, I know we said at the beginning, you and I are probably a little bit slanted towards liking Arctic Wolf, right? but I will say seriously, from my point of view in being on what I call sort of the virtual SOC team with some of my customers, and being part of the conversations with the Arctic Wolf team. And to your point about, we'll communicate with you how you want to be communicated with. I've seen customers lay out really complex phone and email trees, right? Like if it's between these hours, call the boss. If the boss doesn't answer, call the MSP. If that doesn't answer, call so-and-so's mom. Like it's very it's very comprehensive, right? So that you're not running into those challenges of like, oh, I missed the call, I was sleeping, and now malware has been running rampant in my network for 12 hours. It's worked really well. And I've found when I've been with a customer, we've had to call into our concierge team. It is surprisingly delightful to just be like, oh, here's one of kind of my regular gang of folks, right? That know me, know the company, know the network, know the tickets, they know what's going on. And very quickly you're talking about the heart of the matter, not like push 5 for help, push 3 for if you're in Minnesota. None of that. You just, very quickly get to the right people. So
yeah, that's the concierge approach that we have to follow, building that rapport with your concierge security engineer so that you can call them and go, hey, how was your weekend? Oh, good. So no ransomware this weekend, like being able to have that conversation, being able to explain what's going on. And then touching back to something you said before about just the emails. Yeah. One of my favorite is when you get an email that says, hey, are you interested in this phishing solution? Follow this link in the email. Like, well, I'm certainly not doing that or even evaluating that product.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yep. All right. I think last thing just to touch on was pricing. So this is, as the series that I kicked off is very focused on finding a SIM for SMBs. Many of them are budget driven, unfortunately, right? And a lot of these vendors will come in and be like, oh, but if we could just, if we could just offer you a solution for basically double what your budget limit is, then would you be interested? And it's so much about dollars, unfortunately. And I understand, solutions are expensive and there's people, involved. It's not that it's an investment that's not worthwhile. But I think what really gets me frustrated are some of these solutions that say, hey, we have a very simple pricing calculator so you can figure out how much this is going to charge you by the month for the data ingest. And so you kind of go through and you're like, okay, well, I have, this many endpoints. And then it says, well, how much data do you think you'll be sending? And my customers look to me like, I don't know, based on the number of endpoints, how much data is my network going to generate? 1 gigabyte, 1 terabyte? I don't know. But the vendor kind of says, just plug in these things and then, give your credit card and you're good to go. But yet you read the fine print and it seems like, boy, if you wiggle outside of those estimated limits, and it's a 2 gig day instead of a 1 gig day, well, then you're just charged up the wazoo. So absolutely. I guess 2-part question. One, do you have a magic silver bullet calculator so that I can, look at any network and any number of endpoints and say how much log juice they're going to generate in a day? And if you don't, then what's a better way to do that? I assume an all-you-can-eat model would be what clients should seriously be considering.
Yeah. First, when it comes to an actual accurate calculator of how much data needs to be ingested, I do not have a silver bullet. And if I did have one, I would put it into an application and be seeking investors because starting my own company. Yeah. No, by no means. And a lot of those calculators that you'll see out there, like how many firewalls, how many endpoints, how many IDSs, they're not going to be truly accurate, right? I wish I could say it was because, just it's an accident, but there may be some vendors out there that do try to under calculate it so they can charge you a little bit more. So just be wary, right? So be careful. And I would always say overestimate if you can, just so you don't get caught with some of those fees. But it is really difficult if you don't have good long-term historic data to show, well, this is how much each month I've used. And not a lot of people actually have that. So that's where the challenge is. So yeah, I always recommend, it's kind of like the older days of cell phones when you would be charged by the minute.
Yeah.
Or you can pay a little bit more and get the unlimited plan. And I knew people that were like, well, pay by the hour, pay by the minute is a lot cheaper if I go with that plan. Yeah, but you know that you're going to go over. You go over every month and you pay way more than you would pay for the unlimited plan. So just upgrade to it. Or again, I'm really going to date myself right now, but I remember telling my parents, like, can we please just go to the AOL Unlimited? Because I'm tired of having to calculate my hours here of what, or we'll say, one of the alternatives, but I'm not that cool. I used AOL.
Yeah. Hey, you're in good company here. I had AOL myself. And, once other basically the general internet became more mainstream, right? I remember with several relatives having to sit down and have the conversation of like, you don't really need this anymore. There's the internet. They're like, well, how would I use the internet without AOL? You know, that whole kind of joke.
I'll beat you here. I remember my mom going, "Hey, I'm going to the grocery store. Do you need anything?" And me going, "Yeah, could you get me another one of those AOL demo discs, please? I almost ran out of hours."
Oh, that's right. Oh my gosh, AOL and discs. Oh gosh.
Yep.
And TiVos, we've kind of covered it all. That's great. We've talked about some, I love this. We've talked about some really cutting edge things like AI and ML, and then also AOL and TiVo. So I think, just one of the many services we provide here in the podcast. No extra.
Hey,
charge.
maybe next time if you want to talk, we'll bring up Zunes.
Okay. All right. Let's do that. Yeah. When you come back for your 5P.
Perfect.
We'll work Zunes into the conversation somehow. I really appreciate this, Christopher. This has been a great chat. And I think hopefully, folks who listen to this will help us all kind of level set, be setting some expectations for the definitions of things, give us some things to look out for as we're looking for a SOC partner. And I'm sure by the time then this interview airs, I'll probably have another series of the desperately seeking SIMs for SMBs. I'm basically using that series just to transparently share what I'm learning as I talk to these different vendors. And maybe I'll make some friends, maybe I'll make some enemies out of it. But I just think it's such a cool, the whole SOC solution industry, whatever you call it, is so interesting to me, and companies need it so badly, but there's just so much confusion and acronyms and pricing confusion and what are we getting and what do all these acronyms mean? I hope
absolutely.
Yeah, I think this hopefully this episode helped untangle that for folks. Is there anything else exciting going on in your world, in the Arctic Wolf world, that you want to talk about before we close out today?
Yeah, continuing to grow, continuing to expand. Remember, we're always looking for talented individuals. We're also always looking for more customers. So if you're ever interested in a managed detection and response, managed risk, managed awareness, which is a new feature we have, we will be more than happy to talk to you about that. Doing a lot of events coming up as the world starts to open back up. I believe we're doing a nationwide bus tour. So check out our website for events, webinars, that tour, anything you're really interested in. And if you ever want to reach out, please feel free to find me on LinkedIn or just reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk to anyone.
That's awesome. I think last few times you're on, you've said how much Arctic Wolf is always growing, always hiring. Is their best bet just to go, is there a link just right on the website or with all the open positions? And the second part question, are most of them remote? I had somebody ask me, or have the option of remote, or do some require being at a physical office?
Yeah, so great questions. Yes, check out the website. There is a careers page on there, and it comes down to the individual position. There are some remote positions. There are some that are in one of our offices. So it depends on what it is. We are providing the best service out there. So we are going to need people in different locations. So again, I would say check out the website, see what's available. If you have any questions, reach out to me, or really anyone on the Arctic Wolf team would be more than happy to talk to you.
Sounds good, Christopher. We'll hang on the line just a minute, but we'll let our listeners go, and we'll look forward to talking to you on time number 5.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
You've been watching or listening to an episode of 7 Minute Security, a weekly podcast focusing on IT and information security topics such as network pen testing, blue teaming, and building your career in security. For more information, including sponsorship opportunities, visit 7ms.us.